Des mois d'avril. Of fishing.
Welcome back to another exquisite episode of Creepcast. Today, we are going to be reading a delightfully terrifying tale called Me Crew and I Are Stuck Aboard an Abandoned Ship. Can you help us? Part 1 of Part 6. You know me, I like boats and the sea, so I'm very excited to read this story.
He found out an hour ago that this story involves British people, and he has not quit the accent since.
You might be a little more cultured this episode because I might do the whole thing in this accent.
So this story is written by an author. Goes on Reddit as JL Goodwin 1990. And I don't see any links on their stuff to like any books or offsite, but they are an incredibly prolific no sleep writer. There are a ton of stories, titles like I Used to Love Driving Late at Night, or I Don't Shower with the Door Ajar Anymore, or My Wife and I Went to Las Vegas for Our Honeymoon. They have a ton of stories. And this one comes highly recommended, at least on No Sleep itself. And also just the premise, the title of it seemed really cool. My crew and I are stuck aboard an abandoned ship. And we don't do, like, I'm terrified of the sea, and I like nautical stories and like nautical horror and stuff like that. So I am eager for any excuse to crack into a story like this. So I'm looking forward to it.
I wouldn't mind if it got a little Lovecraftian in nature, is what I would say. And I'll tell you something else too. If this story's good, he might become Sir J.L. Goodwin 1990 by the end of this podcast, because that's what we're going to do. Will the author be knighted by the end of this story? I'm very, very intrigued to see.
Be sure to continue to like and support us on audio platforms. Thank you all for your time. Be sure to support the author. You know the drill. You all are great community, and we're lucky to have you.
Just want to say one last thing as well right off the top is for anybody who maybe likes to listen to these on long drives, or maybe likes to, you know, not maybe look at the two not so attractive hosts, consider going over for your eyes and your ears, audio listeners, I'm saying, and go to Spotify. From there, these episodes are there in their entirety, and it helps support the channel. So please go and listen there on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And oh, do be sure to give us a 5-star rating. Thank you. All right.
Actually, while you were doing whatever it is that you're doing, I was scrolling through his Reddit, and I have an exciting announcement about this guy. He is incredibly active in r/Creepcast.
Oh! Well, by golly, we caught ourselves a live one, haven't we?
Someone mentioned his story in our subreddit, r/Creepcast, saying the guys have to read this soon. And the author replied and says, I do indeed plan on eventually, when I have the money, to do the cover art and editing justice, release it as a novel. So he has plans to put this story that we're about to read into a novel. And seems very hyped. He says at the end, I'm hoping the guys will see your recommendation and cover it in a future episode. So, well, that's pretty cool.
I think that's great.
Here you go, Goodwin.
You know what? How about we go one farther? If we love this story, me and Isaiah will chip in to get the cover art done for your novel.
I will. So I'll say this. If we like this story, we will finance it, the cover art, at least that part of it. But if Hunter does not, if we cannot break his accent by the end of it.
All right. So I have to stay in character.
I will finance it entirely myself. But if he breaks at any point from here on out, we have to split it.
Challenge accepted. So let's read. My crew and I are stuck aboard an abandoned ship. Can you help us? Part 1. Go ahead.
If you're seeing this, that means the prayer that I've been making with every single ounce of hope left in my body has been answered. Thank God. I've been trying for the last 3.5 hours to get through any way possible to the outside world with no luck. I'm no computer expert, but the water damage my laptop has suffered must have severely screwed up the satellite link up something fierce. Any attempt to reach any website, be it the official Coast Guard one, or even most social media sites like Facebook or Twitter, have all yielded with the computer crashing and rebooting. But for reasons unknown to me, Reddit, or I should be more specific and say this particular page on Reddit, managed to load perfectly without any issues. So I'm asking here and now, if anyone reads this, for help. For the record, my name is Nathan Rogers. I'm 33 years old, and I was the helmsman of a fishing vessel called the Point of No Return. That is a bad idea to name a boat.
Right, exactly.
Sometimes they'll give like warships brutal names like that.
Right.
Like the ones that the Northwest Passage crew were lost on were called the Erebus and the Terror. They were only called that because they were previously war vessels.
Right. Right. Well, the Terror too. I just want to say, great show. If you haven't seen the show,
It's a great show.
check it out because it's bloody brilliant.
It takes a lot of like historical liberty. The Terror TV show does. It takes a lot of historical liberties in like some of the visions or maybe stories they had or what was stalking them. But as far as the actual like setting and timeline and like the people involved, it's actually very accurate.
Yeah, I know that it gets a bit. It takes some creative liberties here and there, but actually, it's you know, it's. I believe if I remember correctly, they wrote the entire show off of sailors' diaries, based off of diaries they found from the sailors. But I could be wrong.
That's the Point of No Return. Seems like an intense name for like a fishing vessel.
Seems a bit metaphorical, probably, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. What I'm afraid is I'm going to get used to the accent and I'm going to quit thinking about it. I'm afraid that's going to like.
Don't know what you mean. Isaiah, at this point, I'm at my own point of no return. So,
all right.
Right.
I say was because currently she's thousands of feet beneath my feet and the churning surface of the North Atlantic. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In case anything happens to us before anyone reads this or I permanently lose connection, I should give as much of a detailed account as I can. That way someone might know where to find us or at least know what happened. We left our home port of Portsmouth, New Hampshire about a week and a half ago. Oh, they're not even British. Their home port's New Hampshire.
Oh, my. This is quite the debacle. I found myself not sure why, but I believe this was British.
You know, why did you think it was British? You just said at the beginning. He said when we started the call, he said it in a normal voice, oh, they're British? And then he kept doing it. I thought you had info I didn't. Why did you assume they were British?
I think I might have looked into a backstory of a different author's story in our episode recommendations. Well, this makes, well, you know, I'm a seaman, so I'm really a civilian of the world. So New Hampshire, Port Town, that's fine. I'm still British. I'll have to be.
You have to be, or else you have to spend however much money this dude's cover our costs.
Well, maybe we get a deviant artist to do the art. To maybe save a little, a couple pence.
Maybe we commission a $40 artist on Fiverr. We chip in $20. Yeah.
That might save. You know, I don't have to dig too deep into my trousers to find that.
We reach out to him and we're like, here you go, and it's like an MS Paint like screen cap.
I would be insulted if he didn't use it.
Psst, can I tell you a secret? I'm in desperate need of medical attention and care. I'm so old, fat, I'm falling apart at the seams. But I don't know what doctor to use. I don't know anything about doctors. And that's why I use ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality, in-network doctors. Choose the right one for your needs and click to instantly within just 24. That's ZocDoc.com/Creepcast. ZocDoc.com/Creepcast.
About a week and a half ago, bound for the Grand Banks off the coast of Newfoundland. The point of no return is a long liner, and our aim was mainly to catch swordfish along with cod and haddock. The prime season for a good haul was coming to a close, and with our haul during the summer falling short of our usual quota, we decided to make one final run to try and make some extra dough. When we arrived, we started off hauling in many good-sized fish. Everyone was happy.
Woo! Hell yeah! That's what I'm talking about.
Called Spencer. All of these guys from New England, like from Jersey,
It's kind of fitting.
and
New
Maryland,
England.
with like
right?
a super strong, like, North. Oh, Colton Spencer, the youngest member of our crew, as the first fish was hauled on board. But it was short-lived. After a few days, we began to fail to catch anything. It was as if all the fish had disappeared from the area. With our holds not even a quarter full, Gabe, our captain, made the call to sail even farther east, to the Flemish Cap. Thanks to a few of us making the mistake of watching The Perfect Storm to pass the time on the trip out, a few of us understandably had reservations about going so far from any landmass, but the captain pointed out the obvious.
Boys, I wish it weren't necessary to do,
He began, rubbing his thick white beard.
but it's either try the cap or go home broke.
He looked to the sky, which looked clear.
Besides, the radar says there shouldn't be any storms for the duration of our trip.
Up until now, I've never believed in the concept of jinxing, but I can't help but swear that he jinxed the hell out of us with those words.
You also watched The Perfect Storm. Am I wrong? I mean, like, what do you mean he's the one who jinxed you? You're on a boat called The Point of No Return, and you've watched the fucking Mark Wahlberg and George Clooney movie, The Perfect Storm. Notorious.
That's a really good movie.
I haven't seen it in so long, and it's notorious ship going, things go a little mucky on the sea on a boat kind of movie. So,
Right.
just want to say, can't put it all on the captain. Just want to point that out.
Right. It's partially their fault as well.
Right.
We made way for the cap and reached it about a day or so later. To our shock and, of course, our elation, we began to haul in a metric ton of fish. Any apprehensiveness we had melted away like butter in a pan, and we all became infected by the thought of how much money we were going to make. Until, that is, the dark clouds began to move in on the horizon. I'd been at my station at the helm, and I looked out the starboard windows to see the ominous darkness rolling towards us. What the hell? According to the weather reports, the nearest storm was hundreds of miles away, and yet here I was staring one dead in the face.
You gotta be fucking kidding me.
I muttered, flicking on the ship's autopilot and walking for the door that led outside. Pushed it open, thick smell of the ocean and fish wafting over me. Looking down at the aft deck, I saw the captain helping the others ready the lines for their next drop.
Hey, Cap!
I yelled out, raising my voice to be heard above the boombox blasting out hard rock music. Glanced up, shielding his eyes so he could see me better. I stabbed my finger towards the gathering storm, which occasionally flashed with lightning. Still perfectly remember how the captain's face filled with shock and surprise as he turned to see it. The rest of the crew turned and spotted it as well.
Oh, that's just great.
Will, another of our crew, shouted out exasperatedly, dropping the hooks and lines to the deck. The rest of the crew let our curses and some turned to the captain, asking him questions I couldn't hear over the music. After speaking to them for a minute, he walked over and turned off the boombox before making his way up the steps, stand beside me.
Where exactly in the hell did that come from?
He muttered, pulling his hat off his head and scratching at the tufts of gray hair that remained there.
I don't know, sir.
I admitted, watching another bolt of lightning flash inside it.
All I know is I was at my station looking around. 1 minute I don't see it, and the next...
Trailed off. I followed the man back into the wheelhouse as he walked to the radar display. For a moment, he stared down at it, then lightly began to smack at it.
Piece of shit.
What's wrong?
He gestured to the screen.
The stupid radar must be on Fritz again. It doesn't show the storm on the radar at all.
A small wave of confusion swept over me. I'd personally repaired the system the last time it wonked out, and as far as I knew, it had been working perfectly. But as I stepped next to him, I saw he was right. No storm clouds were displayed on the radar in the direction the storm was coming from. What the? Shiver rushed up my spine, one I didn't understand why I'd had. The cabin was warm and comfortable, and yet it felt as if we just walked through thick fog. Finding my voice, I looked at the captain, who held a thoughtful gaze.
So, what do we do?
He took a second to answer, then sighed.
I'm not gonna risk you boys in my ship. Especially not after we have a good catch in the hold. Start plotting us a course back to Portsmouth. Hopefully we'll manage to stay just ahead of the storm.
And with that, he turned and left the wheelhouse, heading back outside to help the others store the gear in preparation for our departure. I could hear the faint sound of them yelling to each other as they rushed about, the music playing again as well. I walked to the starboard windows and gazed out. The storm appeared closer now, the lightning flashes becoming more frequent. A particularly bright flash came. For a moment, my eyes locked on a particular cloud formation that had been silhouetted in it. I blinked my eyes rapidly, the rational side of my brain attempting to wrangle in the other. No, there's no way you just saw that. You know full well storms play trick on your eyes. Shaking my head, I returned to the helm, turning off the autopilot and nudging the throttle forwards, hearing the rumble of the engines increase. I kept telling myself that I'd been seeing things, but another shiver ran up my spine as I couldn't shake the image from my mind. The image of a cloud formed to the shape of a human skull. What a delightful trip.
God, absolute hell.
Nothing bad happening. Let's get on the point of no return. Let's go out farther than we're supposed to. Watch Perfect Storm.
I will say I like the setup so far. Like the idea of being on a vessel and then having an unsuspected storm that's not being caught on your radar. I don't know. I like that.
It's
setup.
fun. It's a classic like ocean mystery setup, I think. I dig it.
Very like Scooby-Doo.
We only made it about 7 or 8 miles west when the storm overtook us. I've been on the water my entire life, and I've been fishing on commercial vessels since I was 18 years old. I've seen many strange and sometimes unexplainable things, and I've seen my fair share of storms, some very bad. But I'm not exaggerating when I tell you I've never seen a storm as fierce as this one. 20 minutes after the dark gray, almost black clouds slid over my head. The point of no return was being hammered by 12 to 14-foot swells, crashing water under the deck. The wind howled as fiercely as a banshee, and the world around us turned almost pitch black, the only illumination coming from the almost blinding flashes of lightning, which were followed by roars of thunder. I gripped the helm with hands that had begun turning white at the knuckles, bracing my legs for each impact. The captain stood beside me, gripping the metal railing next to the helm to keep from falling.
Just keep going!
Yelled at me. Some of the crew stood behind us, staring out at the maelstrom with wide, frightened eyes. It was a fear that I found infectious. For as much as I kept calm for all outer appearances, inside I was terrified. As horrifying as horror movie monsters are made out to be, they don't hold a candle to the existential dread and terror that Mother Nature at her worst can instill you with. Suddenly, Wyatt, one of our engineers, flew up the stairs from below.
Captain, we're taking on water somewhere, and I can't find the source.
So many of the crew's faces go pale, but the captain remained calmed.
All of you, get below and help Stroxy find this source and either patch it or seal it. Then start the pumps to get the water in the boat out.
For a moment, nobody moved until he barked again.
Do you want to end up at the bottom of the ocean? Move your asses!
That got their attention, and they quickly followed Wyatt down the stairs to the crew quarters and lower decks. As we crested another huge swell, I spared a glance at the radar screen. It still showed no sign of the storm on its green screen as the line made its way around in a circle. I shook my head, feeling a strange feeling, one I couldn't place come over me. But I pushed it away, forcing myself to focus. Everyone's counting on you, Nate. Keep your head in the game and pray to the good Lord above you make it out of this. I shot a glance at the captain.
You really think we're going to make it through this, Gabe?
I asked, the seriousness in my using his first name making him look hard at me before clapping a hand on my shoulder.
With a good crew and a terrific man at the helm. Son, yes, I do.
He declared, pulling out a pipe from his pocket and lighting it. Thick, hazy smoke filled the room as he spoke again.
I've been through far worse than this, after all.
Somehow, I doubted the man's words, but I tried to let them bring some much-needed comfort to me. A large wave crashed over the bow, splashing the front windows with water and obscuring my view ahead for a few moments. When it cleared, the world outside was again pitch black, the outer lights of the boat barely illuminating 20 feet around us. Strong vibration suddenly emanated from the floor beneath my feet, and I shot a glance down at the metal. What the hell was that? My answer was given a moment later as another crew member, Andrew, ran up the stairs. He was soaked with seawater, and his eyes darted around in their sockets in panic.
Captain, the pumps are working the hardest, but we're taking on more water than we can expel. We can't find the source of the leak either.
The captain cursed and turned to me.
Nathan, hold fast up here and keep going east. I'm gonna go below and try to help.
Not giving me a chance to answer, he turned away, beginning to head towards the companionway stairs. I just turned back to look out the window when the brightest flash of lightning came, turning the world around us from night to day. It also revealed something dead ahead, something that made my heart almost stop.
Oh, fuck my life.
Racing towards the point of no return was a rogue wave,
Oh, fuck.
one that dwarfed all the swells around us. My mind screamed at me that it had to be at least 30 or 40 feet high, enough that it blocked out the sky ahead.
Captain!
I screamed at the top of my lungs. I heard him stop and the sound of his footsteps as he dashed back next to me.
Good God Almighty! Nate, turn us broadside into the wave! Our only hope is for us to roll over completely!
I turned to see him snatching for the microphone handset, which connected the wheelhouse to the ship's intercom as I began ripping the helm to port. Whoa. Oh my gosh. I think I would rather be shot.
I would just say, Captain, put a bullet in me head. Is what I would say.
Our only option is to do a complete barrel roll.
that.
No, absolutely not.
I'm not fucking doing that, no.
Yeah, no, kill me, please.
Yeah.
Behind me, I heard Andrew let out a strangled scream as he spied the behemoth racing toward us.
All hands! We have a rogue wave incoming! Brakes for impact!
The captain shouted into the mic. Below, I heard the terrified shouts of the crew spring up. I clenched the helm in a death grip as tears silently poured out of my eyes. In my head, the scene from The Perfect Storm flashed. Wah, wah. The Andrea Gale being flipped and driven into the ocean. I only had enough time for one quick thought. Please, God, no. The wave smashed into us with all the force of a dozen runaway semi-trucks. The portside windows of the ship shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the freezing seawater rushed over us in a seemingly unending wave. For a moment, my mind was unable to comprehend what had happened. And then it began screaming at me as I felt the world begin to rotate. We're underwater. We're flipping underwater in the wave. The realization horrified me, and I felt certain that we would begin sinking like a stone to the bottom of the ocean. Let a silent prayer for my death to be quick. And then, to my astonishment, we emerged back into the world above the waves. The shock at still being alive froze me in place, and then I looked around. I spied the captain, locked his arms in a death grip around the metal bar next to me. Andrew had been tossed to the back of the wheelhouse. I saw a large gash in his head as he stumbled to his feet, coughing out water. Instantly, the captain ran to the stairs and shouted down them.
Somebody get up here and give me a damage report!
As he did, I looked down at the screens in front of me, felt a wave of despair wash over me as I saw most short-circuited after their meeting with the ocean. The radar still glowed green, as the screen crackled and flickered, as though it would go out in a second. Wyatt appeared at the top of the stairs, blood dripping from his right arm and soaked to the bone.
Give me some good news, Wyatt.
The captain yelled over the howl of the wind that screamed into the wheelhouse through the broken windows. To me, it sounded almost more like a plea than a demand. Wyatt shook his head.
The portside engine is dead, sir. Starboard is still running, but barely. Our main generator is dead, and the backup is running everything at full capacity.
Let out a shaky breath and looked at the floor before finishing.
And the pumps are dead as well, sir.
For a moment, nobody spoke. The implication of the man's words hung like nooses around all our necks. The pumps were dead, so were we. It was only a matter of time before the ship filled up with too much water and foundered. We're now running on borrowed time, I thought numbly. When the captain spoke again, his tone was more subdued.
Go down below and tell the men to gather all the emergency supplies they can. Food, water, first aid kits. Have them bring the life raft up and set it down. We'll stay with the ship as long as she'll take us. Then we'll abandon ship into the raft.
Wyatt began to speak.
Captain, with all due respect, these waves will tear apart the...
Don't argue with me! Just do it!
Wyatt took a step back and turned wordlessly and headed back down the gangway. And then turned to Andrew, who had begun shaking slightly, a result of both the freezing water covering him and fear.
Andrew, try the radio and send out a distress call. You know the drill.
For a moment, the younger man stood as still as a statue. Then he rushed to the radio and jammed his hands down on the transmit button.
Mayday! Mayday! This is the fishing vessel Port of No Return. Registration number 57306.
We're approximately, I don't know, somewhere off the coast of Newfoundland, and we need urgent assistance. Our ship is taking on water and sinking. Does anyone read me?
I tuned his words out as he began to repeat, turning instead to look out the broken windows. I didn't say it out loud, but I knew we were royally screwed. Wyatt's right. These waves will tear the raft to pieces long before anyone reaches us. The numbness began to spread as I was faced with the unavoidable thought that these might be the final minutes of my life. Moments of my past flashed in front of my eyes. Growing up as a child in Portsmouth, spending weekends at friends of my mother's in Kittery Point, visiting BG's boathouse with my mother and aunt, my relationship with Dana, my ex. A single image suddenly appeared in my mind. My friends and family crowded around a cross commemorating us, crying. My breath began to come in short, ragged gasps as I tried to force away the image. Bing! The sound snapped me out of the inner battle with my mortality, and I blinked for a second. What the? Then it came again. Bing! The realization suddenly crashed into me as hard as the wave had. The radar. Looking down, I watched the flickering screen as the line made its way around again. This time, as the sound rang through the wheelhouse a third time, I saw the large shape appear, and it sent a bolt of renewed hope through me.
Captain! I've got something on the radar!
Sound of Andrew's distress call stopped as both men turned towards me.
I think it's a ship!
Instantly, the man was at my side, gazing down at the screen.
I don't believe it. You're right!
He breathed out in an astonished tone, then he locked eyes with me.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking, Nate?
He asked. I swallowed.
Gabe, right now, there isn't much of an alternative.
Looked at me for another second before nodding.
They'd head approximately south-southwest and pour on the power.
For the next 20 minutes, we crashed through the storm in silence, aside from Andrew, who returned, attempting a distress call. Finally, he gave up.
Captain, the rogue wave must have snapped off the radio antenna.
Still, we continued on. I strained my eyes against the lashing wind and rain pouring through the windows, praying to catch sight of our only chance at survival. And then, in the flash of lightning, I saw it. Even a few miles away from us, I could tell the ship was huge. She rose almost imposingly out of the water, rolling up and down in the waves of the storm. Another flash of lightning showed that her hull was black, while her upper decks were painted white. Two large red and black smokestacks rose into the sky, almost disappearing out of sight. I heard the captain let out a low whistle as he spotted it as well.
She's gotta be, what, 800 feet long?
I called over the wind.
Try more like 1,000!
By now, most of the rest of the crew had reappeared from the below deck. They brought the gear the captain had ordered up and had packed it into waterproof bags. I'd also requested that the satellite phone and laptop be brought up as well. Unfortunately, the phone was very much dead from being submerged, but the laptop, according to Will, was able to be salvaged. When they caught sight of the giant ship, they let out cheers and turned to hug one another. I realized I hadn't been the only one feeling that death was breathing down our necks. As we drew within half a mile of the ship, I realized something was off.
Captain, she's dead in the water. Not moving at all.
If she'd been under power, it would have taken longer to draw near. Captain looked hard but nodded.
You're right. She must have snapped off her mooring lines in the storm somewhere. It's a ghost ship adrift!
Saw the crew's faces at the news.
So, What do we do now?
Kenny, the other engineer, asked. The captain turned to them as I steered us closer.
We stick to the plan. We draw alongside her and find a way aboard. We transfer our equipment on board, and then we'll go from there.
The look of hope returned in some of their eyes, but I saw apprehension in their others. I didn't blame them one bit. Fear still coursed through my veins. All it takes is one screw up, one mistake, and we're all dead. The captain ordered me to move around to the ship's port side so as to give us a small bit of shelter from the storm. He then snapped on the powerful searchlight, which thankfully hadn't been taken out by the wave, and traced it over the ship. A few minutes later, I heard him let out a triumphant laugh.
Nate! Move us next to the middle of the ship! There's a ladder dangling there!
He was right. I saw the white lines and wooden steps flailing about in the wind. Sparing a glance behind us and seeing that the ocean was beginning to creep over the back of the transom, I hastily maneuvered the point of no return over to the ladder, nudging the throttle into neutral as we drew alongside. Sparing a glance out of the open side door, I saw Spencer and Will reaching out with boat hooks to snatch the ladder. Yes, the two men hooked it and lashed it onto our railing.
Okay, one man at a time. Get the gear and get up there.
Slowly, almost painfully, the 8 members of our crew made their way up the ladder and onto the ship. As I watched Wyatt climb out of sight, sound caught my attention. I looked down to see all of the remaining gauges die, and the sound of the remaining engine idling died away. Crap. Almost immediately afterwards, I became aware of a new sound. It was one that spurred a new wave of panic in me. It was the sucking sound of the sea rapidly flooding the point of no return.
Captain! She's going under!
I screamed, snatching up the last bag of supplies. I saw the man give an almost pained look as he cast a final look at the vessel he'd worked his entire life to afford before shouting at me and Kenny, last to aboard besides himself.
All right, boys, abandon ship!
Kenny went up the ladder first, unable to wait for him to make it all the way up. The captain and I unsnapped the ladder from our railing and began climbing after it. We were halfway up when I heard the sucking sound increase to a fever pitch. Stopping and sparing a look below me, I saw the point of no return bow lift out of the water as her stern slipped below the waves. She rapidly began to sink, and I turned to continue climbing. That was when a scream came from overhead. I snapped my gaze up to see a body fall past me, missing me by less than a foot. For a moment, shock kept my mind from working until I realized who I'd seen in the split-second flash of lightning. I screamed out into the dark, but when the lightning flashed again, I saw no sign of him floating in the waves. Only the bow of our ship as it finally slipped below the waves. I shouted the man's name again, the wind tearing the cry from my lips and off into the storm.
Nathan, he's gone!
Came a cry from below me. I shot a look down, seeing the captain looking up at me with a horrified expression.
Get up the ladder!
I fought my emotions for a moment, then climbed as quickly as I could for the railing. A few moments later, both the captain and I hauled ourselves over, collapsing onto the wooden deck with sputtering coughs and groans. When I raised my head, it was to see the ashen face of Wyatt looking down at us.
Where's Kenny?
I took in a shaky breath and shook my head slowly at him. I saw the shock and horror flash into his face. The same happened to all of the men standing behind him. For my part, I simply felt numb. Even though I'd lost my aunt to ovarian cancer in 2009, lost one of my mom's family friends to a brain tumor in 2012, I never actually seen someone die before. Not in real life, anyway. My mind was a jumble. I couldn't think properly. Thankfully, though, the captain stood up and spoke up, his voice shaking only for a second before hardening.
As hard as this may be for everyone, we need to get inside and out of the storm. We'll have time to be able to grieve later. Right now, we need to get away from the wind and rain before we catch pneumonia or hypothermia.
His words seemed to bolster everyone, even myself, and we all stood, gathering our supplies and moving to find a door inside. After a few minutes searching, we found one, and after snapping on the waterproof flashlights we all had, we stepped inside the ship. Okay, I've got to say, that was awesome. That entire sequence of like the ship going down and the storm and them rolling and everything and having to catch the ladder. Oh, that was so good. You just said yeah without the British accent.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, no,
No,
yeah,
I mean,
that's
that's what they sound like. So, I mean, not every word is going to be so colourful.
No. That was a break. That was a break for sure.
I think that I'm still in my accent. I'm still doing it. It's just, yeah. Sometimes you sound like that,
Okay.
you know? Not everything's
Anyway.
some fruity, delightful piece of ginger, you know? I don't know what I'm supposed to tell you.
Anyway, that whole thing was great. I really loved it. The descriptions of like the captain and the foul moments, watching the ship go down, like the terror of it, the intensity. That was great. That was awesome. And now, how cool of a concept! There's a ghost ship in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of this storm that they have to go on to. And like, oh man, that's so cool. This is great. This is stellar. I love this. Okay. Anyway. Instantly, the sound of the howling wind grew fainter as we found ourselves inside a companionway of some kind. It seemed like it was meant for the crew. It seemed more Spartan and function over form than what I'd seen from the rest of the ship. Nobody said a word as we made our way down until we came to another door. Will, being the first in line, reached out and opened it, and we stepped into what I can only describe as the most luxurious lounge I've ever been in. The walls were plastered with wood that reflected back in the glow of our lights. What appeared to be marble lined the ceilings overhead. I saw dozens of tables and chairs, ones that had been once scattered across the room, lying overturned or on their sides. No doubt thrown about by the storm. Walking further into the room, I turned to the left and aimed my flashlight at the wall. I nearly jumped out of my skin as my light reflected off a huge face that gazed back at me.
Jesus!
Feeling my heart begin a marathon in my chest.
What is it?
I heard Andrew call out. All the men ran to me and aimed their lights at what I'd seen. Instantly, the tension that filled the room was replaced by the sound of laughter.
Fucking hell, Nate. Are you really that afraid of the Queen of England?
Okay, now
Redeemed.
your accent
Redeemed.
is like
Redeemed.
Well, no, because these are American sailors on
Hey,
a
what,
British
are you
ship.
that afraid
Yeah.
of the Queen, Nate?
That, by the way, is like a like hand of God pull for you. That this becomes a British
Redeemed.
story after you completely made up the British part of it. Vinny, another one of our crew, asked as he fought for breath. I let out a shaky breath of my own as I played the light over what I now saw was a painting, one of Queen Elizabeth II. Then I began to laugh along with him.
Good Lord, Nathan, you really are a pussy.
For a minute, we all stood there, laughing and feeling the mood lighten somewhat. The levity helped lighten the sadness that we all felt. It was cut short by the captain's voice as a loud rumble of thunder came from outside.
All right, everyone. Change into dry clothes and break out the sleeping bags. Then get some sleep. This has been one of the worst days of our lives. We need to rest. Tomorrow, we'll take stock of the ship and figure out what to do next.
And with that, everyone began to fan out, finding a lone corner to change in without being seen. As I did, I approached the captain.
Gabe?
I said, tapping the man on the shoulder. Turned to look at me, and I instantly saw the haunted look in his eyes. The poor man blames himself for Kenny. I wanted to say something, say that it wasn't his fault. Instead, I told him I wanted to stay up a little, get the laptop out, and try and get a signal from the satellite connection, try and find a way to send out a call for help. After a moment's hesitation, he agreed, gesturing towards the vast amount of chairs and tables.
Go ahead. Just try and get some sleep afterwards.
I nodded, patted him again on the shoulder before turning away. That's where I am now. Changed into dry clothes and found a thick, cushioned armchair on its side. Set it upright and pulled out the laptop. Battery was, thankfully, fully charged. I have a solar charger if it gets low, which survived. But as I said at the start, it had to have sustained some kind of water damage because it won't let me go to many, if any, sites. Only this one. I'm the only one of us left awake now. All around me, I can hear the snores of my fellow crew members, hear them rolling over to get comfortable on the carpeted floors. I still hear the rain pounding on the roof of the great ship, hear the thunder rumble, and feel the ship lurching up and down in the waves. Pray she doesn't hit any rocks during the night. We don't need another problem on our hands. There is one final thing I have to say, though I can't help but feel foolish about it. I know that we're the only ones on board. Otherwise, people would have already come by now. We'd be swarmed with crew or passengers. And yet, I can't shake the feeling I'm being watched. I know it's ridiculous, but I can't make the feeling go away. I feel like a goldfish with its owner staring in at me, and I don't like it one bit. I even took a walk around outside this lounge to reassure myself nobody else is here. I know the captain wouldn't have liked me doing so, but I wouldn't have been able to sleep otherwise. If anyone reads this, can anyone help us? We're only fishermen who've dealt with a 70-foot-long liner, not a giant cruise ship or ocean liner. Does anyone know what we have to do to get power going again, where we have to go, if we can get power restored? We might be able to get the radio on board working again and let people know we're out here. And is there anything else important we should do tomorrow? Anything at all you can think of? Please let me know if anyone sees this. I'll check back in the morning, see if anyone has. Oh, and one final thing. I don't know if it'll help, but when I went for my walk to prove to myself no one else is here, I found a life ring, which had the name of the ship stamped into it. Maybe someone can look to see if the ship has been labeled missing or something, which would work to try and get someone to know where we are. The name of the ship bears the same name as a huge, almost creepy-looking painting on the wall that, in the dark, I try not to look at. The RMS Queen Elizabeth.
End of part 1.
I gotta say.
Go ahead and say
I like it.
What do you got to say?
I like it. I like this a lot.
Yeah, I do too.
Just the uniqueness of the premise. We were a fishing vessel that found this abandoned cruise ship, it looks like, but no one's on it, and like we don't know where we're at, and there's a storm, and I feel like there's some entity watching us. Just gotta say, like, I already have a soft spot for like ocean stories or nautical stuff, and this is checking every box I have for a story like this. It is so cool. I'm liking this a lot right now.
It's very nice.
That name,
I like that. It's also setting it up too, where I feel like it's setting up a paranormal angle, potentially ghost ship kind of thing. You even get some fun. You know, it could go any direction, which I think is fun. Paranormal, monster, you know, whatever. It could go in so many different directions, and I'm excited to keep unveiling the story.
I thought that name Queen Elizabeth was familiar. And I was like, what's that? So I look up RMS Queen Elizabeth. In 1972, while she was undergoing refurbishment in Hong Kong Harbor, a fire broke out aboard under unexplained circumstances, and the vessel was capsized by the water used to fight the fire. The following year, the wreck was deemed an obstruction to shipping in the area, and in 1974 and 75 was partially scrapped on site. Well,
well, that doesn't seem too good.
Well, that's not great. Just got to say, being on that ship now, not a good thing, I would argue. Anyway, so yeah, they're on a ghost ship. So that's
they're
great.
on a ghost ship at the moment, right?
They're on a ghost ship with a giant skull in the clouds looking down on them.
Yeah.
Apparently,
It did give some Harry Potter vibes there for a moment. But you know,
yeah, you know what? I was thinking about that. I was like, there's a skull in the cloud, and there's a mention like before the wreck of the captain lighting a pipe. But I'm also having so much fun with like the tone of the story, like
it's great.
The ship and like, Captain, we're taking on water, whatever. That I'm willing to forgive it. I'm willing to look over it. Yeah. It's okay if it's a little cheesy. I mean, they're on a ghost ship in an ocean, right? So.
Yeah, no, I'm having a great time with it.
All right, so we are now on to part 2. Thank God. To say I'm relieved that the first post got through would be an understatement of massive proportions. Even though it seems like not many people saw it, the fact that anybody did is a blessing in itself. It gives me hope that all of us might make it out of this situation yet. First and foremost, to the people who did see it and commented, I can't thank you enough. Especially to the person who suggested a plan for what to do in regarding the power. It was actually thanks to you that I was able to give the captain and the others a suggestion of what to do today. Unfortunately, due to the fact we were so excited to get off the point of no return before she sank out from under us, we didn't bring the life raft with us. Only the supplies we thought we'd need. We were too caught up in the fact we had a better alternative to remember to light up the ladder. I do have to confess one thing to you all though. When I first woke up this morning and checked the comments you left, I thought people were either pulling my leg, thinking I was bullshitting you all, or that you had to be mistaken. After all, if the Queen Elizabeth caught fire and sank years, if not decades ago, how the hell could we be on board? Ghost ships, legitimate ones, only exist in horror films, not real life. There'd be a mistake made here. However, after some of the things that have happened today, I can't help but start to wonder if you're right. And if you are, we're in a whole lot bigger trouble than I thought we were. I'm jumping the gun though. I should tell you what went down today. When I first woke up, the first thing I realized was that the storm had passed. The rain no longer pounded on the roof of the ship, and it no longer twisted about in the swells. For a moment, it was so calm that I forgot where we were, what had happened yesterday. Then everything came crashing back to me, causing me to sit up straight in my sleeping bag. The first thing I saw was the captain, who sat in one of the lounge chairs. He must have woken up a while ago. His head turned in my direction as I pulled myself out of the bag and to my feet, and he gave a short nod. Winding my way around the sleeping forms of the others, I made my way over to him.
How long you been up, Cap?
I whispered as I picked up another chair and set it beside him. He shrugged.
A little while now. Was planning on waking everyone up in about 20 minutes or so anyways.
I could still see that losing Kenny still weighed heavily on his shoulders. The man likely hadn't got much sleep due to it eating away at him. I decided to say something.
You know what happened wasn't your fault, Gabe. Kenny was above us. We couldn't have done anything to save him. It was just an accident.
For a moment, I saw his eyes harden and his mouth open as if to snap at me. Then he slumped into the chair, his body seeming to sag.
I appreciate you saying that, Nathan. More than you know. But a captain's job is to keep his crew safe, to get them home. I didn't do that for Kenny, and I'm going to have to live with that.
I wanted to argue, but I saw that no amount of it would change his mind. Instead, I nodded and turned to look out across the massive room. We roused the others a few minutes later, and as they opened up the supplies we'd brought to bring out some food and water, the captain reminded me to check the laptop. Booting it up, I saw the battery was low, making a mental reminder to set the solar power charger in the sunlight outside to charge it back up. Then I checked the post it had made. Hope and excitement surged through me as I saw comments left below.
You guys, people saw what I wrote.
In seconds, I was surrounded as everyone crowded around me. A bottle of water and a granola bar were shoved into my hands as they read the comments you all had left. There was silence for a few moments. Then Spencer spoke up.
That can't be right.
He said softly. He looked up at us.
These people can't be right? There's no way the ship they're talking about is the same one we're on board.
Wyatt answered him.
No way, Spence.
They either think we're playing with them or just spewing bullshit, or they're thinking of another ship. We're not in some early 2000s horror film.
I shot a look at the captain.
Cap, you're the oldest of us.
Do you know if there was a ship called the Queen Elizabeth that did catch fire and sink?
He stayed quiet for a moment, seemingly lost in thought before answering.
There was a ship called the Queen Elizabeth that was built in the 1930s. And it did catch fire and sink in Hong Kong Harbor in the early 70s. But no, there's no way this could be the same one. There's no such things as ghost ships that manifest out of nothing.
He stood up, seeming to push away any remaining thoughts of the matter from his head.
We need to be getting on to a more realistic and pressing matters, though. We need to find a way to get power going. Without it, we have no way to operate the radio to send out a call for help.
I pointed out a particular comment that gave an idea of what to do. He leaned down, silently reading it before nodding.
That's our plan for today.
He declared before splitting us up into two teams. One team, comprising of myself, Andrew, Spencer, and Will, would explore as much of the ship as we could, while the captain, Wyatt, and the only other remaining member of our crew, a tall, muscular Italian man named Vinny, would try and find their way down to the bowels of the ship to restore power. With the plan made, and a set of walkie-talkies given to the captain and me to maintain contact with each other, we exchanged a last, good luck and stay safe, left the lounge. Flicking on our flashlights, the four of us slowly walked back through the hallway we'd taken to get inside. A moment later, we emerged into the bright light of day. The sun felt nice and warm on my face, and I couldn't help but let a small smile cross my face. Disappeared though, as my eyes looked out beyond the railing. The endless ocean surrounded us, stretching far beyond the horizon. No sign of land anywhere. A small shiver shot through me as the image of our ship slipping beneath the waves replayed in my mind, along with watching Kenny fall to his doom. I shook my head. Snap yourself out of it, Nate. Keep focused. I pulled the solar charger from my pocket and set it down next to the open hatch. Pick it up later when we came back this way. Andrew spoke up, pointing to the row of lifeboats that hung from davits that spread out away from us.
You think those would still be safe to use?
I shrugged my shoulders.
I don't see why not. I wouldn't want to try and use one of those to get back to shore.
I pushed the hair out of my eyes and pushed my glasses up my nose.
All right, let's keep moving, guys.
For the next few hours, the four of us explored both the inside and outside of the ship, occasionally stopping to radio our position back to the captain. The Queen Elizabeth was indeed a luxury ship in every sense of the word. The wood on the outside decks was well varnished and teaked, shining brilliantly in the sunlight. The same was true for the miles of wood that plastered the walls of the carpeted hallways and rooms that crisscrossed the inside like a maze. I was almost in awe of how beautiful it was. However, there was one thing that surprised me, and I wasn't the only one to notice. As we walked through another lounge, Will said the words that incessantly reverberated in my head.
Anyone else notice we haven't seen a single TV on board yet?
Andrew shrugged his shoulders.
Hey, who knows? Maybe they took all the TVs off the walls for renovations or something. Or maybe it's one of those ships that deliberately doesn't have any in order to keep the passengers from not taking part in the activities.
His words reassured me a little, but I still couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. The entire time we'd been exploring the ship, an indescribable feeling had followed me like an annoying dog. And to make matters worse, the feeling of being watched I'd had last night hadn't gone away. Every so often, I would shoot a look behind us as we had walked, aiming my light back the way we'd come. I saw nothing, but for whatever reason, it felt like something had been there and pulled back just out of sight every single time I'd look. As we entered what, according to the sign above the door, was the first-class smoking room, the radio on my belt chirped. There's a layer of static above everything due to the massive amount of steel and wood in the way, but the words of the captain were unmistakable.
Nathan, we finally reached the engine room. We also found the power source.
I heard a small trace of surprise in the man's voice as he continued.
You're not going to believe this, but the ship is powered by what appears to be Yarrow boilers. I haven't seen these things on a ship since I was a young man in the Navy.
Spencer's face scrunched up in confusion.
What in the hell was a Yarrow boiler?
I shrugged my shoulders, then hit the transmit button.
Can you get the power going?
There was another wave of static before he answered.
It'll take a little while, but yes. We'll be able to get power back to the ship. Just give us about 20 minutes or so. Half an hour at most. It's been a while since I've had to fire one of these behemoth subs. And there are 12 of them down here.
And with that, he clicked off.
Well, now what do we do in the meantime?
Will asked. Spencer began to answer him.
I remember seeing on a map on the wall that there's a first-class gym on this deck. The four of us could go and lift some weights until they get everything going. Or, if we fancy a swim, there's a swim pool as well. Or hell, we could even...
He kept speaking, but I'd stopped listening to him. The feeling of being watched had returned, this time with a vengeance that caused a cascade of shivers to shoot up my spine. For a moment, I resisted the urge to look around. Then I cast my eyes towards a set of windows to the outside, where someone peered in at us. On the outside of a cruise ship? Oh, man.
Yeah, who's staying on the ship, you know?
Well, I mean, it's he's looking outside, so it would be on the side of the ship, right?
Well, I assume that he's probably like on a deck looking in, is what I would assume.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah. I only caught a glimpse of the figure for a moment before they realized they'd been spotted and yanked their head back out of sight. But it was enough to see what looked like a small boy or young teenager.
Hey!
I shouted out, rushing over to the window. It didn't open, but I was able to crane my neck enough to look around the corner. The deck was empty in all directions, but I knew I hadn't seen things. There had been someone there.
Hey, guys! Did any of you see that?
There's no answer from behind me. I could imagine them looking at me like I just grown two heads. They probably think I'm nuts.
Seriously, I'm not kidding. I saw someone out there.
They still didn't respond. I felt a slight pang of irritation flow through me and turned back, beginning to speak.
Guys, don't be assholes. I'm asking you.
The smoking room was empty. My voice died in my throat, and I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. What the hell? I looked around, my eyes wandering to the ornate wooden bar that lined the back of the room. But there's no movement over there either.
What the hell? Did they freaking leave?
I breathed out incredulously. The irritation I'd felt a moment ago reared its head again, and I strode to the open doors to the hallway.
Hey, assholes! What the hell's the matter with you? We're not supposed to split up!
My voice echoed away into the gloom, bouncing off the wooden walls and dying away, but nobody answered. A thought suddenly entered my mind. Oh, this better not be a prank. This is not the time or place for that shit. I knew that the three men loved to play practical jokes on themselves and the rest of the crew, but I would have thought they'd known better than to pull them with this predicament. I let out a deep sigh and began to walk down the hall, my footsteps muted by the carpeted floor.
If this is a joke, I'll fucking wring your necks.
I muttered, reaching a T-junction and shining my light down it. Empty and silent. Kept going straight, passing by a sign showing the direction of the gym and movie theater. I remembered hearing Spencer talk about it and quickened my pace. I expected the sound of their voice to slowly begin filtering down to me. But as I approached the door to it, I still heard nothing. And when I shone the light inside, reflecting off rowing machines, stationary bikes, and other exercise equipment I didn't recognize, my exasperation grew.
Know what? Screw this.
I said through gritted teeth, snatching the walkie-talkie from my belt and thumbing it.
Hey, Captain, you're not gonna like this, but the others quite literally abandoned me and ran off to God only knows where. I'm trying to find them, but they've completely fucked off. Any advice on what I should do? Over.
A wall of static greeted me as I let go of the transmit button. Nobody answered. I hit the button again.
Captain, do you read me? I'm alone. The others have run off. Over.
More static. I began to fiddle with the dials, changing channels. Interference, stupid piece of shit. I hit the button again.
Hello? Does anybody read me? Over.
The static suddenly stopped. The hallway went silent, a silence I've never experienced before, one that seemed to be alive, if that makes any sense. Then a voice suddenly tumbled from the walkie-talkie speaker.
Hello, Nathan.
My eyes shot down to the radio in my hand, my breath catching in my throat. It felt like someone had just poured a bucket of ice water down my back. That wasn't the captain's voice. That wasn't any of the crew's voice. For a moment, I debated saying nothing, and I slowly pressed down the transmit button. My throat had gone as dry as cotton.
Hello?
My voice coming out gaspy and ragged. For a few seconds, there was no reply, and then came the voice again. A man's voice, deep and low.
Welcome aboard, to all of you.
My heart began to thump hard in my chest, and my breathing quickened.
What the actual fuck, man?
I forced myself to hit the button again, forced my voice to come out much calmer than I felt.
Who the hell are you?
There's another stretch of silence in which I began to furiously look over my shoulders, the feeling of paranoia growing by the second, and then my blood turned to ice as a new sound emanated from the radio speaker. Sound of the man beginning to laugh. Another laugh joined the first, this time a woman. I stared at the radio as if it were possessed as more and more people's laughter began to filter out of it, sounding as if an entire room full of people had just found what I'd said the most hilarious thing they'd ever heard. Fear began to fill every fiber of my being, a new kind of fear different than the one I'd felt in the storm last night. And then it climaxed as a horrifying scream, one that sounded like a woman being brutally murdered tore from the speaker. I practically flung the walkie-talkie out of my hand to the floor, clapping a hand over my mouth as I backed up into the wall. As soon as the scream finished, the radio went silent. Dead. For a few moments I stood there, hands still clapped over my mouth and staring at the radio like it was about to sprout legs and chase me. I fought to get my racing heart, shuddering, breathing under control. The logical part of my mind trying to make sense of things. You're panicking, Nathan. You're panicking, and you're panicking so much that you're beginning to experience auditory hallucinations. When the mind breaks, it conjures up things that aren't there. What you need to do is get outside into the fresh air. The fresh air will do you good. I took a deep breath, feeling myself beginning to calm down. The fear I'd felt began to melt away like ice in spring. I shook my head.
Yeah, you're supposed to be the calm and rational type, Rogers.
I whispered to myself. I let out a soft laugh and took a step towards my dropped radio, but I stopped as I felt my foot step on something. Something that wasn't the carpet. Looked down at the floor. There, crushed under my foot, was what appeared to be a folder of some sort. No, not a folder. I crouched down, aiming my light as I picked the object up. There was artwork on the cover. I could see a violin, a film reel, shuffleboard, and other items decorating the cover. Big, blocky black letters in the middle of the cover read, "Program for today." And in the bottom right-hand corner was the word Cunard in cursive scrawl. I looked at the cover as I walked over and picked the radio up, clipping it back to my belt. Focusing my attention on it was helping me rapidly calm, and I decided to quickly flip it open and see what it said. There were only 2 pages inside. The top of the left page was adorned with the word notices, while the right page was headlined by Program of Events. My eyes began to slide down them, silently reading it out, until my mind caught up with my eyes. Wait, I didn't just see that, did I? I flashed the light back up to the top right of the page, where the date was stamped. Thursday, June 21st, 1956.
What?
I blinked my eye a couple times, silently praying that the date would change. I was seeing things, but no, it remained the same. I began to feel my heart pound in my chest again.
This makes no fucking sense, man.
For a moment, my mind flashed back to the comment I'd seen that morning about the ship having sunk decades ago. I shook my head, tried to stay calm. Oh, just get the hell outside, Nathan. Taking a breath, I turned to head back in the direction of the smoking room and froze. The program fell from my hand to the floor. My heart thundered in my chest and my breathing came in short, ragged gasps. There were figures standing in the hallway down by the T-junction. I couldn't tell how many, but there were enough that they blocked the way back. In the gloom, I couldn't see any features, just the dark outlines of them. Remembering the flashlight in my hands, I began to raise it to aim at them. That's when the light flickered out. I was plunged into gloom as I stared down at the light, smacking it and mentally pleading for it to come back to life, but it was no use. The light was dead. Realization suddenly filled me as my mind screamed at me that I'd taken my eyes away from the figures. When I snapped my head up, I almost screamed. They had drawn closer, packing the hallway from wall to wall. They made no noise at first, and then I heard the whispering begin. It started quietly, almost to the point I thought I was hearing things, but then it began to grow louder. I couldn't tell what was being said. The voices were so low it was impossible to distinguish individual words. Even so, I felt a new bolt of terror shoot through me at the sound, and then my fear compounded as I saw the figures take a step towards me. I began to violently shake as I slowly began to back away. Then they came for me. The figures were suddenly a blur of motion, moving far faster than any human being could. They streamed towards me, the whispering suddenly intensifying to a fever pitch. Caught off guard, I stumbled backwards, tripping over my own feet and falling to the floor. My right elbow slammed into the wood paneling, and I felt a bolt of pain shoot up my arm. The figures swarmed over me, the whispering morphing into laughter, and screaming. A moment later, more screaming began, my screams. I raised my arms over my head, covering my face and curling into a ball. Tears began rolling down my face, and I felt at any moment I'd be torn apart.
Nathan!
The shout cut through the silence. I stopped screaming, but kept my arms over my head protectively. Then I felt a hand begin to roughly shake me. The terror returned, and I lashed out.
Get the fuck off me!
The voice came again, a familiar voice.
Hey, easy, bro, easy.
The realization made me lower my arms and open my eyes. 3 faces, etched with panic and fear, looked down at me. For a second, I fought to find my voice.
Andrew, Will, Spence?
Relief crossed the faces of my crewmates.
He's back.
Andrew said quietly, wiping visible sweat from his brow. I uncurled myself and sat up, looking around. I was lying on the floor of the smoking room. Close to the windows, I'd seen the figure outside. Sunlight still streamed in, landing on where I'd collapsed to the floor. Looked up at the others.
What the hell happened?
Spencer shook his head, still looking rattled, but Andrew again answered me.
Dude, I have no fucking idea. One minute you were talking about going to check out the other areas of the ship. The next you suddenly yelled and ran to the window. Then you just started pulling a statue routine. You didn't respond to anything we said. You just stared at the ocean, not moving and not blinking, until you suddenly fell to the floor and began screaming.
Let out a shaky breath of his own.
You scared the ever-living shit out of us.
I blinked rapidly, my mind trying to make sense of his words. Had I really hallucinated everything? Had it all just been in my head? I stumbled to my feet, aided by Will and Spencer. Andrew just kept looking at me, concerned look on his face. I took a deep breath of my own.
I'm okay.
My voice sounded far calmer and surer than I felt.
You sure?
I nodded.
I must have gotten less sleep last night than I thought. The stress and the sleep must have made me, I don't know, fall asleep standing up or something?
I could see the other two relax immediately, taking my words at face value, but Andrew continued to look at me for a moment, seemingly unconvinced. Finally, he nodded. The sound of static stabbed through the air, causing me to almost jump out of my skin. Then the sound of the captain's voice rang over the radio on my belt.
We're in business, boys.
I heard him declare happily. A moment later, I felt the floor beneath my feet shudder slightly from what must have been the boilers coming to life. And then the lights came on all throughout the ship. The smoking room became ablaze with the yellow light of what had been the incandescent bulbs, banishing away the gloom that lurked in the corners like monsters in the closet. I began to say something to the others when a new sound began. Music. Music began spilling out from what had been the hidden speakers in the walls or ceiling. It echoed all throughout the deck. I could hear the instruments, along with the woman's crooning voice reverberating far down the hallway, and likely all throughout the ship as well. Spencer looked up at the walls.
Man, that's one hell of an old song.
Andrew nodded, still looking hard at me. Will suddenly snapped his fingers.
I know this song. My grandmother used to play it all the time when I was a little kid.
He began snapping his fingers again, thinking hard.
It's by a singer from the 40s and 50s called, I think, Joe Stafford.
Now Andrew did take his eyes off me, looking over at him.
What's the song's name?
He asked, mildly interested. Will thought for another moment before answering.
You Belong to Me.
As if on cue, the singing voices sang out the 4 words. I couldn't help but shiver slightly at them, still feeling as if I jumped through from Kansas to Oz and then been booted back to reality. I cleared my throat.
Hey guys, would you mind not telling the captain about what happened with me?
They looked at me for a moment, thinking.
Yeah, sure, Nate. As long as you don't ever do that again.
Feeling relieved, I nodded. Spencer spoke up.
Come on, we should try and meet back up with the captain. Figure out what to do next.
With that, he walked out of the room, Will following close after him. Andrew shot me one more look.
Sure you're all right?
I nodded.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I lied. I raised my right arm to rub the back of my neck as he began to leave the room. But I stopped as a throbbing pain suddenly shot up my arm. I let out a small gasp of pain, bringing my left hand over to feel the back. As soon as my fingers touched my right elbow, another sear of pain rippled out. I turned and looked at where I'd fallen. There was nothing there for me to have slammed my elbow into, and the carpet had been thick and plush, too plush to have hurt myself. The mental image of falling back in the hallway suddenly burst forth in my mind, falling as those figures rushed towards me, whispering and laughing and screaming. My eyes slowly rose to look down the now brightly lit hallway. Even from where I could see the sign showing the location of the gym, I shuddered. It was just a hallucination, wasn't it? I swallowed hard, forcing the thought from my head, and hurried to catch up to the others. We met the captain and the others back in the lounge we'd spent the night in. They found a way to turn the music off, and for that I was thankful. All we'd heard as we walked through the ship had been songs that sounded like they were 70 years ago or older. All they did was remind me of the program I'd clutched in my hand, seeing the date on it. We could tell they must have been breaking their backs to get the boilers going. Sweat and black stains covered their faces and clothes. The captain glanced down at his watch.
We have only about an hour or so daylight left. Let's try and make our way to the radio room to see if we can send out a distress call. After that, we'll figure out where to go from there.
We all nodded and hurried after the man as he led the way. The room wasn't hard to find at all. Once we'd entered the upper levels of the ship, ones I could tell were meant for crew only, signs led us right to it. My hopes of being able to get off rose with each step we took, and then were dashed as we reached the closed door to it. The captain reached out and attempted to turn the handle, but it refused to turn. A few of us gathered up next to him and attempted to force it to open, but it wouldn't budge a single inch.
Damn it! It's locked.
Captain growled as he finally gave up. Felt my heart sink. Could see the same expression in everyone else's face. But then the captain continued.
Okay. That means there's got to be a set of keys somewhere on board that can get us in there.
He rapped on the metal door with his knuckles.
So our next job is to find them. They'll likely be in the crew's sleeping quarters, maybe in the captain's cabin.
He looked at his watch again.
But that'll be a job for tomorrow. We should head back to the lounge, get some food and water on our systems, and get some sleep. We've done a good job today. And finding our way through the ship now that she has power is going to be much easier.
I felt equal parts dismay and anxiety as I followed the others back to the lounge. And as much as I tried to ignore it, I still felt watched. The lights didn't help one bit. I kept looking back over my shoulder, afraid I would see the boy I'd seen in the smoking room window again. Or worse, the shadowy figures. Thankfully, though, I never did. And we made it uneventfully back to the lounge where we ate our dinner, packages of MREs that had been part of our emergency supplies, and then began to settle down for the night. I used the solar charger I'd left outside all day to charge the laptop. As I booted it up, Will came over to me.
You truly all right, man?
Quietly asked me. I nodded at him, giving him a false smile. He sighed.
You know, as much of a fucked up situation as we're in, the only good part was hearing that song again. I haven't heard it since my grandmother passed away.
I looked up at him.
You like that kind of music? Honestly, I like everything about that time period. The 1950s, I mean. Like the music, the movies, the celebrities, the cars. Between you and me, bro, I like it a hell of a lot more than the 21st century. If they invented time travel in my lifetime, I'd go back there in a heartbeat and never come back.
He let out a soft laugh and patted me on the shoulder and walked away to his sleeping bag. I watched him go, then looked over at the captain. He gazed around at everyone, looked over at me. And I started slightly. I saw something in his eyes that I wasn't used to seeing. Worry. Worry and fear. Did he see something down in the engine room? Also, but my prediction, by the way, is what was that guy's name who just got Will? Will 100% is going to get like sucked into the the 1950s time loop after that quote. There's no way. Yeah,
Monkey Paul's wish.
He is going to the abyss. He's going to the time prison on the ship. Just as quickly, it washed away, and he nodded at me. I returned the gesture, and he pointed at the laptop in my lap. It was an unspoken question. Are you going to try sending a message out again? I nodded, and he stood up, stretching his arms over his head and yawning before shaking his head slightly and heading for his own sleeping bag. And now, here I am, the only one left awake again. The captain turned out most of the lights in the lounge, something I really did not like, so I moved over to a table that remained upright, one that had a lamp built into the middle of it, turned it on. I now sat here typing this out, but I can't help but look up, my eyes darting around the dark, expansive room. I'm terrified every time I take my eyes off the screen. I'll see those figures again. I standing in the dark and staring at me. I wish so much that we could just jump into one of the lifeboats on the side of the ship, lower it into the sea, and row away from this godforsaken place as fast as we could. But with only about a week and a half's worth of food and supplies, no idea where we are, we could end up rowing directly into the middle of the Atlantic if we're not there already. Like I said at the start, when I first started this day, I felt for sure you all had to be wrong. That just because this ship was named Queen Elizabeth, it didn't mean it was the same one that caught fire and sank long ago. But after what I saw in that hallway, both the program from 1956 and those things that I truly don't know whether I hallucinated or not, I'm starting to believe you might be right. As much as my logical mind tries to tell me it's impossible, I think we might have jumped out of the frying pan of our sinking ship and into the literal fire. And honestly, I'm beyond terrified. I have no idea how I'm going to sleep tonight. I think in the morning, I'll see about getting myself some kind of weapon. A chair leg, a knife, something. May not do anything against any kind of ghost, but it might make me feel better, at least. Please, if you're still there, if you end up reading this, please let me know what we should do tomorrow. Should we try and find the keys to the radio room like the captain suggested? Should we do something else? Is there anything that I might be missing here? Does anyone know anything more about the Queen Elizabeth? Anything that might give me a clue as to why this is happening or just to direct us to any important places? Anything you can think of might help us. God knows, right now, we need all the help we can get.
End of part 2.
You know, I like that it's going this paranormal route. Like a ghost ship.
Yeah.
In theory, I feel like a ghost ship from a forgotten past sounds kind of corny, but it's working really well here. I think also
They
just
play it
showing
well,
that each
yeah.
person kind of goes into their own hell when they basically experience these phenomenons, these like ghosts almost, right? So it seems like Nathan, our main character, he experienced it, and so did Captain. Is what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's it is a theoretically corny idea, but it's played in such a way here where it's like more personal torment, and like I think I'm just so in love with the setting that I'm willing to like look over any any other
I
issues
think the,
with it. I'm like, yep,
I think the setting is fun, but I think what's important here that makes the story not go into a super cheesy or like corny area is that it's good characters. If you don't have good characters in your story that you care about, no one's going to give a fuck. So you can, if your characters, if you have likable characters, then that's all you need to really have to make a compelling story, to make it more emotionally tied in. And right now, I like all the guys. Like I think all of the characters seem to be, I don't know, just well crafted. I like Nathan and Gabe or Captain a lot. So.
Yeah, every time you quote him, I imagine Captain Price from Call of Duty. That's how he sounds in my head.
Yeah.
But then I like the idea of like Andrew being like kind of skeptical of him and stuff like that. Like it's playing it pretty well so far.
On to part 3.
The only phrase I know how to describe our current situation right now is up shit creek without a paddle. Things have gone from bad to far, far worse since last night. And to tell the truth, everyone now is scared out of their damn minds. Well, almost everyone, but I'll get to that in a minute. Before I say anything, let me again say thank you to those of you who commented on last night's post. Despite everything that happened today, we managed to make some progress, and I can't help but think it was thanks to you all giving us some direction. Let me quickly answer a few things that you have brought up. First and foremost, as soon as I opened the laptop and saw the comment, I went and pulled one of the maps of the ship off the wall, looking to see if there's indeed any sort of chapel or religious gathering areas for us to hole up in. Unfortunately, the Queen Elizabeth seems to never have had one built aboard her, so that idea is out. Secondly, the reason why we set up base camp in the lounge is because it was the first place we reached when we came aboard. It's the place we know best. After yesterday, though, and specifically with our current predicament, I'm beginning to think moving to 1 or 2 adjoining cabins might be a better idea. Not as much room for anyone or anything to creep on us. That being said, let me tell you what happened today. We were aroused by the captain just after 10 in the morning.
Come on, Nate.
He said softly to me, shaking my shoulder.
We've got work to do today.
Then he moved away to wake the others. For another minute, I simply lay there, staring up at the ornate ceiling high above our heads. The horrible mental images of the shadowy figures had followed me into my nightmares, and I dreamed of running down dark and seemingly endless hallways, the figures always just a step behind me. I shivered slightly as I remembered the voice welcoming me, welcoming all of us aboard. I attempted to force the image out of my head as I pulled myself from the sleeping bag into my feet. Once everyone was awake, we all quickly had breakfast before I broke out the computer to see what people had said. I quickly scrolled down to the comments I saw were there as the others came over. As much as I wanted to tell the others about what I'd seen yesterday, a small part of me whispered that none of them would believe me. Especially after what Andrew, Spencer, and Will said they saw happen to me. If anything similar happens to me or anyone else, I'll tell them, but not until then. Everyone gathered around to read what you all suggested. I could tell to them it was like a lighthouse beacon, helping guide them to safety. I couldn't help but feel a small pang of disappointment flow through me as they again dismissed the ghost ship comments, even though I'd known it was coming. Apart from potentially the captain to me, nobody else had seen anything out of the ordinary. Shot a glance his way as he leaned in to read the screen, but any trace of fear I'd seen last night had been wiped away, replaced by his usual calm, calculated expression.
Well, at least people seem to agree with my idea to find the keys.
He said finally, standing back up and seeming somewhat pleased. Wyatt leaned in and pointed at another comment.
Cap, what about this person's suggestion to move from the lounge to some of the cabins to sleep? It'd be a hell of a lot more comfortable than another night on the floor.
The captain rubbed his beard, thinking.
They may have a point. I wasn't able to get much sleep last night. We'll move our stuff into some of the first-class cabins.
Just as the same as yesterday, we were paired off into two teams. The captain, Andrew, and Spencer would head off to the crew quarters to try and find the keys, while myself, Wyatt, Will, and Vinny would try to find any food we could add to our slowly dwindling supplies. I very much didn't want us splitting up again, not after both what you all had said and what I'd experienced, but try as I might to say so to the captain, he remained steadfast.
We need to cover as much ground as possible, Nate.
He said after we dumped our stuff into some adjoining cabins near the lounge, and with that, he turned and hustled the other two in his group away. I watched them go, saying a silent prayer for them to be safe before turning to the others.
Well, which way do we go?
Vinny asked, gesturing to the many hallways that branched away from us. I looked down and studied the map of the ship for a moment. My eyes drifted past the maze of rooms and lounging areas before settling on a large area near the stern of the ship.
How about we start here? At what looks like a restaurant called the Veranda Grill?
The three men craned to look at the map.
Sure, why not?
Wyatt said, shrugging his shoulders. With our destination set, we turned and began heading aft. Passing through the lounge, we found ourselves in more hallways that seemed to stretch on forever.
Man, they had a lot of cabins just in first class alone.
Vinny said as we passed a small sitting area looking out onto the starboard side of the ship, then he lowered his voice slightly.
Hey, did any of you have anything weird happen to you yesterday?
The question caused me to stop dead in my tracks.
What do you mean, weird?
Everyone stopped now. Wyatt let out a soft groan.
Oh, come on, Vin. Nothing weird happened yesterday. The captain said so.
But I could tell he wasn't being completely honest. Will's brow furrowed.
What are you guys talking about?
Took a step towards Vinny.
Did something happen to you guys down there in the engine room?
Wyatt let out another protest, but Vinny seemed to ignore him.
I don't know, man. All I know is we were down there working like crazy to get the boilers up and running. When I looked over at Captain, he stopped in the middle of giving us directions. I had no idea what to do next.
Saw the big man shiver slightly before continuing.
He had the creepiest expression on his face. It was like he'd been hypnotized or something. The lights were on, but no one was home. Then he just snapped out of it. He looked absolutely terrified for half a second, then seemed to remember what was happening and kept going.
Wyatt cut in.
That's because he didn't get much sleep last night. He literally told us that when you asked him what was up. I swear to God, Vinny, you're making a mountain out of a molehill with this dude.
Vinny shot a slightly irritated stare at him before turning back to Will and me.
I just need to know, did any of you have anything weird or unusual happen to you guys yesterday?
I exchanged a glance with Will. His expression was that of a perfect poker face, but the look in his eyes betrayed what raced behind them. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I debated whether to come clean about my experience, but Will spoke before I did.
No, nothing like that.
Nothing besides accidentally tripping over an overturned chair.
Yeah, they shouldn't do that. That's a horrible idea.
Well, I thought that he was already going to say that. He's like, if anybody brings it up, I'll tell them. I wonder why he just didn't outright say, yeah, it happened to me too.
He should be like, no, this is a thing that happened. We don't know what's going on. We need to have all the cards on the table. This is not time for whatever this is. Yeah, absolutely not. I felt a wave of surprise shoot through me. The entire time I'd known Will, I'd never known him to deliberately lie. He was someone who always told the truth, even if it ended bad for him. Where the hell did this side of him come from?
There, see? All is as well as it can be.
Wyatt said triumphantly.
Happy now, Vin?
I saw him study our faces for another moment before shrugging.
All right. Guess it really was nothing.
And with that, he turned and began walking down the hall again. I spared another glance at Will, but he simply shrugged at me and turned to follow them. I stared after him for a moment, unable to move, till a familiar shiver shot up my spine, one that indicated I was being watched. I swung my head around, looking behind me back down the hallway. Nobody was there. Nobody I could see, anyway. Till another shiver passed through me, I turned and jogged to catch up to the others. We found a set of stairs that, according to the sign next to them, led down to the restaurant deck from where we were on the main deck. Heading down a few flights, we found ourselves on yet another landing. Will suddenly let out a small laugh and pointed.
Hey guys, check it out!
Across the landing from us was what looked like a small booth. Glass and metal bars separated the person who sat inside from everyone outside. Looking up, I saw a sign hanging over the window. Purser's office.
That must be where you drop off any paperwork you need to travel aboard, along with valuables you want locked in the ship's safe.
Wyatt said. He let out a laugh.
You think there's anything valuable still in there? Jewelry, cash, shit like that?
I turned to him, feeling a bit astonished.
You're joking, right? Hey, we're alone aboard on here. If you took anything, I don't think anyone would know.
He said, grinning slightly.
Yeah, until the ship gets brought back to dock and the owners discover shit missing from their dumbass.
Vinny said in a displeased tone. Now it was Wyatt's turn to give him an irritated look.
He's just kidding, jeez.
He looked down at the floor.
Killjoy.
For my part, I gave him a long look, then looked over at the purser's office again. I don't think it'd be anyone on land who'd be pissed if we stole anything, I thought. Before anyone else could say anything, the radio let out a squawk. My heart momentarily began to thud in my chest. For a moment, I was terrified I'd hear the man's voice from it again. Instead, the elated voice of the captain came.
Nate, we found the keys. They're hidden away in the desk in the captain's cabin.
A feeling of relief washed over me, and I pulled the walkie-talkie from my belt and thumbed it as I saw relieved smiles cross the others' faces.
That's terrific, Cap. You want us to head straight to the radio room?
The man spoke again, a sharp burst of static masking his voice.
Say again?
Now the man's voice came in loud and clear.
Negative, Nathan. We might still need some supplies. We don't know how long it'll take for anyone to reach us, but we're going to begin running low on food soon. Go check out the restaurants like you were planning, and then come meet us.
Wyatt's face fell at his words, but I saw the other two nod at me.
Roger that, Cap. We'll try and be quick as we can. Over and out.
With that, I clicked off.
Come on, guys. This way.
I said, pointing to a sign at the start of the left hallway. Veranda Grill, this way. Four of us made our way down the hallway. A porthole stood open halfway down it. As we passed it, the smell of the ocean filtered in. I slowed to take a deep breath of it, letting it invigorate me a bit. And froze. I didn't just see that. I did not just see that, but I knew I had. As we passed the porthole, I'd shot a glance out, hoping to catch a quick glimpse of the relatively calm waters, and I'd caught a split-second glimpse of someone walking past it. It had been too quick to see anything besides a blur, but it had been enough. I felt the fear of yesterday return. Oh shit, not again, man. My heart raced in my chest and I felt a lump in my throat.
Hey, you all right, Nate?
The voice snapped me back, and I looked up to see the others had turned to look at me. All of them were confused expressions on their faces. I fought to find my voice for a second, then spoke, trying to sound calm.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
Will cocked his head at me, giving me an odd look, but didn't say anything. Fusing the urge to look out the porthole again, I started walking, pushing past them to begin leading the way.
Come on, let's go get this over with.
For a moment, I heard nothing behind me, and then I heard the others follow.
Holy freaking shitballs!
Wyatt breathed out.
That's... wow.
We stood at the entrance to the restaurant next to a small sign that read, "Please wait here to be seated." For my part, I couldn't blame him for such a reaction, even after what just happened. I couldn't help but feel in awe of the expansive room in front of us. Like the rest of the ship, wooden paneling covered the walls. The only difference was that in here, squares of tiles of aquamarine had been indented into them. Some had ornate shapes, and across the room, I saw a massive painting or stitching of what appeared to be a woman clad in ancient Greek or Roman clothing. Below her, 4 horses reared up as if to charge, while several men seemed to hold everything up in the midair. Tables with expensive-looking tablecloths littered the room, the sea green upholstered chairs around them almost inviting people to come and sit in them. Shooting a glance to my right, I saw a huge grand piano set against the far wall and a huge aquamarine curtain covering what must be a window to the stern deck.
I don't even want to imagine what it must have cost to eat in here.
Vinny said, causing everyone to laugh softly.
You're not joking.
I replied, then pointed across the room at a metal swinging door.
Look, there's the door to the kitchen.
Winding our way through the sea of tables and chairs, we reached the door and stopped in front of it. I turned back to the others.
All right. Cross your fingers we find something, guys.